94 WKTI Milwaukee.
Human Rights, brought to you in cooperation with the Milwaukee Human Relations Radio Television Council. Today's topic is the evolution of black and Hispanic political power. Our studio guests are Orville E. Pitts, Assistant Family Court Commissioner in Milwaukee County, Luis Santiago, a founder of Vote Incorporated, and Matthew J. Flynn, Chairman of the Democratic Party of Wisconsin. Our moderator is David J. Foran, Public Relations Director, Marquette University.
Welcome to our program. Some call it clout, some call it political power. Both are catchwords in American politics for those who want to have a say in the country's direction and to serve their own or their group's needs. In recent years, and in particular in recent months, we have been witnessing changes in the political power game, mainly as it involves blacks, Hispanics, and other minorities. Blacks have challenged white incumbents in major cities and have been elected mayor. In the past, such things were rare. The minority vote was looked on as somewhat of a prize to be captured by a particular political party. But rarely would a minority consider challenging a white incumbent. Orville, could you set the stage for our discussion? Is it a new ball game?
I believe so. Based on the demonstration of strength that we saw in 1982 and early 1983 in Chicago, Illinois, with Harold Washington capturing the mayoral seat, Wilson Goode in Philadelphia. I think that people are becoming very much aware of the fact that maybe there is some correlation between their voting participation and the benefits to be derived in a democracy. I think up until now, many of our people engaged in voter apathy. But people are beginning to participate more vigorously. Voter registration drives are taking place across the country. And I think the key in the future, of course, will be the intensive voter registration in the Midwest and the Northeast.
Luis, you are involved in a drive nationally and locally to register Hispanic voters. Could you describe that operation?
Well, our voter registration effort is not only geared towards the Hispanic community. It is a multi-ethnic voter registration drive. And what we're trying to do is to build coalition and networks between the black, Hispanic, Indian, and Caribbean community and the poor white community. What we have found is that it is not just simple tasks just to basically go out into the community and start registering people. We are dealing with a lot of agendas. We have a black agenda, Hispanic agenda, the American Indian community has an agenda, and we have to address those agendas and make it clear that we are not setting forth any particular agenda, but our concern is to get people registered so that they can go to the polls. And that is basically the principle. The second phase is then to begin to talk about educating people in the electoral process and getting them interested in the specific candidates and the specific issues.
Matt, what efforts are the major parties making to recruit minorities for leadership positions in their own parties and possibly having candidates run for office?
Well, voter identification and voter registration is one of the key strategies of the Democratic Party certainly, in the upcoming presidential election and beyond. Back in 1962, Jack Kennedy started a voter registration effort in the Democratic Party that probably set the stage for Democratic successes nationally for a decade after that. I have worked very closely with Luis Santiago and others who are actively involved in voter registration. Studies have shown that that about 60% or more of voters who do not vote, were they to be registered, would vote Democratic. So we are not simply targeting it to one community, as Luis said, but rather just across the board trying to register people, and so far I think we've been successful at it.
I think that the one thing is that, at least for Vote Inc., I can speak for, is that we understand, and as being a Puerto Rican myself, I understand the needs that our community has as a Puerto Rican to accelerate and to move forward in the political area. And we will do that as a Puerto Rican community. But we cannot separate ourselves from the other total community, and we need to work together, and it becomes a necessity. And we are no longer back in the 60s where we feel it's necessary to look at and say, well, white people have to be here, black people need to stand here, and Hispanic people need to stay here. I think that we are all being affected by the problems and by the present administration's, the cuts that we are seeing and feeling. They're not geared only towards blacks or Hispanics or just poor whites. They're affecting all people. So all people need to come together, and we all need to address the problem that affects us all.
I want to respond to some degree to both Matt and Luis. I really feel that voter registration drives are absolutely necessary for participation in the electoral process. But there's two other steps. There must be voter education, and I think you touched on that. In other words, who's running? What are the issues that are involved? And what do these people stand for who are candidates for the various offices? Unfortunately, in our community, there must be a third step. You must remind the people that Election Day is on Tuesday, and in many instances, we must go and get these people and actually take them to the polls and make sure that they vote. Some people simply forget that there's an election taking place on a particular day, or they don't know what the issues are. So the other two steps are absolutely necessary for success.
In tying into what Orville was saying, is what Vote Inc. has done now is it has put together a proposal. Basically, we're looking at about $250,000, which Vote Inc. would need to start off the first process to begin to coordinate and organize and get the voter registration drive out. To the second phase is to begin to hold workshops, training people, setting up forums with candidates and without candidates. And that's something that we're looking at, particularly the ones without the candidates, so that the community people can begin to dialogue the kind of issues that they feel are important to them. A lot of times when you bring in the candidates, you're talking, you come in there and the questions are already written up specifically, and you hear their response. They know what the questions are. Well, we want to know what is it that the people feel. Let the next door neighbor know what the person down the block feels on a particular issue, and from that we can then gather a sense of direction on the type of issues that we need to be addressing. Also very important, and that is going to be the biggest task I think that we all have to face come the '84 election, is how do we get these people out there to vote? It's hard to register people to vote. People think it's a very easy process. It's very difficult to do that. But once you get them registered, the big hill that you really have to tackle is then how do we get them to the polls? How do we create some mechanism that we can pick up people, take them to the polls? Because every time we're involved in an election, we run across the same problems. And we have not developed the type of sophisticated, I think, operational vehicle to address that problem. You know, Orville's correct on that.
You know what the irony of all that is back in the 1950s and the early 60s, people who wanted to vote in the South and other states were physically prevented from doing so. They faced great personal danger to register to vote and to go to vote. Now it's when some of those deterrents have been eliminated, although unfortunately not all in some areas of the country, people in general across the board in every group take it somewhat for granted, which is really a pity, because I think if people kept in mind the dangers that others encountered 20 or 30 years ago, they'd be more inclined to go to vote.
And people don't understand how lucky we are here in Wisconsin that you can register to vote at the polls the same day.
Absolutely.
I was going to make a comment that I was in Montgomery, Alabama for a conference, the Alabama Democratic Conference yesterday. That was a group that was founded in 1960. Its sole purpose at that time was to oppose the policies of George Wallace. That group has grown. There are over 300 elected black elected officials in the state of Alabama right now. There are 2 black federal judges in that state. There are over 33 mayors in that state. There's a number of county sheriffs. But they have demonstrated through the years that that this can happen if you work at it. And I was very pleased at the banquet last night to see that it's not a solidly black group any longer. It is well integrated. And that goes back to the point that Louis made earlier, that whites and blacks must work together with Hispanics and other minorities so that there can be a real democracy in this country.
How have the major political parties reacted to the voter registration drives, or have you gotten any feelings back from either the Republican or Democratic
Well,
party?
obviously, the Republicans enjoy no enthusiasm for voter registration drives because they, I think it was mentioned earlier, that any person who is not registered, if he does register and if he does vote, will have a natural or an inclination to vote Democratic. So they have no enthusiasm for that. As a matter of fact, if you look at the last two presidential elections, the Republican Party focuses primarily on the South and the West. They usually just give up the Midwest because they believe that there's voter apathy there, and if the people do come out to vote, they're going to vote Democratic anyway. And hence, I think, lies the key to success in 1984, is that we must register the people in the central cities of the Midwest and also in the East, and get them out to the polls to vote.
I think that we cannot no longer assume, and I say this basically on the conversations and what I hear from people, that no one party, the Democrat nor the Republican Party, can no longer assume that they have the Hispanic vote or the black vote or the Indian vote right there. It's going to be there. I think people are more politically conscious today. They're going to look at issues. They're going to look at the candidate, the morale, and the background of those individuals. But one thing that I do have to say also onto that is that the Democratic Party has been much more receptive in terms of being involved and more willing to sit down and discuss and work with us. Right now, Vote Inc. has extended an invitation to the Republican Party to get together and participate. To date, we haven't even received even the response in the letter, whereas the Democratic Party has been participating. They've come to the meetings, and we're sitting down with the Wisconsin Political Caucus, Women's Political Caucus, and the Democratic Party in the near future to sit down to begin to talk about how we could coordinate a voter registration drive. So I think in one hand, you can't assume that all minorities are going to vote Democrat just because you're going to register them. But on the other hand, I think people are going to be looking at who is coming out here, who is being receptive, and who's visible. And right now, the Republican Party has not been coming out to our community.
Matt, can you speak to that?
Yeah,
also?
I think what Luis says is very true, that neither party can take any vote for granted. And I'll give you an example. Prior to Franklin Roosevelt, prior to 1932, the vast majority of minority Americans voted Republican, not Democratic, as a legacy of the Civil War era politics that lingered in 80 years. That changed with Franklin Roosevelt, but the fact of the matter is that Nelson, Rockefeller, Jacob Javits, and other moderate Republicans have attracted minority support. So I think it'd be a grave mistake for any Democrat to think that he or she could take any minority vote for granted. What we're trying to do is to recruit more minority members into the Democratic Party as members, get them involved in leadership positions. For instance, Luis is the vice chair of the Northside Democratic Unit. Orville Pitts came within a whisker of being the congressman from this district and ran a fantastic race. Sal Sanchez is the chair of a Southside Assembly District unit. My goal, what I've tried to do with the party in the last 2 years, is to open it up, to give minority and any other member of any group who wants to join the party a reason for being in the party, feeling that they can have access to any position of power. And I think so far we've had some success in that.
How important was the unsuccessful election that you had, but it was such a tight election? Did that change now? As somebody looked at, does the Democratic Party and the Republican Party now look at a black's candidacy in Milwaukee with perhaps more as more important than it has been in the past?
Yeah, I think that what happened last September stunned and surprised and probably shocked a number of people. A lot of people have come to me and said to me that if they thought that I had any chance, they would have cast their ballot for me, or contributed financially to my campaign. I think that you'll see the excitement, the exhilaration, the exuberance of what happened last fall evidence itself again in 1984. There's a lot of excitement in this community, and I think that you're going to see the number of candidates that are running for the various automatic races, supervisory races. I think that you're going to see a greater black and Hispanic